In China, there are 600 million people, and their monthly income is only 1,000 yuan. 1,000 yuan in a medium-sized city might be difficult even for renting a house. On November 23, 2020, a special day destined to be recorded in the history of global development, the world witnessed the birth of the only country without a population living in poverty. China announced the eradication of poverty. Do you believe it? Xi Jinping's accelerated socialism has achieved success in its phase, and what is about to happen is frightening. The middle class in the cities shouldn't rejoice too soon, according to Xinhua news agency's report. On November 23, 2020, the remaining 9 impoverished counties in Guizhou province have exited the sequence of impoverished counties, and thus all 832 impoverished counties in China have lifted themselves out of poverty. China has created a miracle in the history of human poverty reduction because Xi Jinping has said, "We must achieve moderate prosperity. Regardless of what maneuvers you have made, we must achieve moderate prosperity." This is a political task. It is not achieved gradually according to the development laws of the country, but is a top-down political task. So, since it's a political task, it will definitely be accomplished. This is why, nearing the end of 2020, especially from September onwards, a large number of impoverished counties were all cleared. On September 14, Hubei province declared poverty-free counties. On November 14, Xinjiang and Yunnan simultaneously announced the elimination of impoverished counties. On November 16, 17, 20, and 21, 4 regions, Ningxia, Sichuan, Guangxi, and Gansu. It seems that each province is anxious to quickly clear its list. In other words, in the past few months, they had to gradually clear the entire list, leaving no province behind. It is evident that they are aiming to make such an announcement before the end of 2020. Coincidentally, with the issue of the epidemic affecting the country's economic development, the Chinese government urgently needs an achievement to showcase to the world. Look at how much work our Communist Party has done. However, the then Prime Minister, Li Keqiang, spoke the truth, openly contradicting Xi Jinping's 2020 Comprehensive Poverty Alleviation Initiative. Li Keqiang said, "In China, there are 600 million people, and their monthly income is only 1,000 yuan. 1,000 yuan in a medium-sized city might be difficult even for renting a house." Li Keqiang also mentioned a migrant worker, over 50 years old, who has been working outside for over 30 years, earning the same income every year. This year, he hasn't found a job, and the whole family is in trouble. For a country's prime minister to speak such harsh truths, it indicates how severe China's poverty problem is. Let's take a look at the real-life situation of people in poverty-stricken mountainous areas in China. The girl, with fear in her heart, picked up a piece of meat from the bowl and handed it to her huddled sister in the corner. Even though she dared only to take a small piece at a time, she still faced the aunt's powerful gaze and sarcastic remarks. The 3 sisters dared not speak up. Living under someone else's roof for a long time, they had long become accustomed to enduring hardships. This is a truly poignant documentary. The girl is named Sel Ying, 10 years old this year, residing in an extremely remote and impoverished village in Zhaotong, Yunnan. A few years ago, her mother, unable to endure the poverty and misery at home, heartlessly abandoned them and left for a distant place, leaving no trace since then. To make a living and support the family, The father had no choice but to work in the city. The three sisters live in a dilapidated and shabby adobe house with bare walls, containing only a worn-out wooden bed. Every day, the three sisters can only rely on eating potatoes to fill their stomachs. Even if they are difficult to eat, they force themselves to consume them. Happy people use their childhood to heal their whole lives, while unfortunate people use their entire lives to heal their childhood. In the poorest areas of China, people rely on eating potatoes to alleviate hunger, and over 90% of the population has never eaten rice. It is difficult to imagine how impoverished life is in the remote villages of Butuo. In most households there, humans and animals coexist, with pigs, sheep, and other livestock freely entering and exiting the houses. If you see a chicken standing on the bed, there's no need to panic. Local residents typically have 2 meals a day because the land in this area is relatively infertile. Only potatoes have a decent yield, while the cultivation of buckwheat and corn requires fertilization. Therefore, impoverished families can only afford to grow potatoes. Scandal: Xi'an Luanen's poverty alleviation. CCTV rarely exposes fake achievements. Luanen's poverty alleviation involves fabrications and even grabbing journalists' phones. Xi'an responds, immediately set up an investigation team for an in-depth inquiry. The female county party secretary takes the lead in deceiving the poverty alleviation inspection team, spending $153 million to create falsehoods. Former Secretary Liu Xiang of Lianhua County, Pingxiang City, Yangzhiji Province, falsified the poverty alleviation inspection of a national impoverished county. She purchased household items in advance for some impoverished households that had already lifted out of poverty, totaling more than 153 million yuan. In recent years, the Chinese Communist Party's official poverty alleviation projects have repeatedly been exposed for fabricating results. Recently, during an official visit to console impoverished households in Shandong Province, officials were caught. The so-called impoverished households not only possesses a 3-bedroom apartment, but also hides luxury items such as Madotai and Wuliangyi, sparking skepticism among netizens. In reality, many impoverished households in China do not receive the assistance they need. Mr. Wu, a netizen, commented, "In the end, everything they say is fake. This government is just a fraudulent government." The reason was extreme poverty, lack of social assistance, and the inability to afford basic necessities, even clothing for the children, making life unsustainable. In China, elderly people committing suicide due to lack of money for medical treatment has also reached alarming levels. China's largest retail bank, China Merchants Bank, recently released its annual financial report. And based on this report, some mainland analysts have analyzed the wealth structure of the Chinese people, revealing a staggering wealth gap. China Merchants Bank, the retail banking leader in China, recently published its 2020 annual financial report. A strategic researcher named Flying Warrior analyzed that through this annual report of China's largest retail bank, one can observe the wealth structure of the Chinese people. The report shows that the total number of retail customers in 2020 was 158 million households, of which 3.1 million households had assets exceeding 500,000 yuan. This accounts for 1.96% of the total customer base. The overall assets of retail customers were 8.94 trillion yuan, while the total assets of customers with assets exceeding 500,000 yuan reached 735 trillion yuan, accounting for 82.15% of the total assets of retail customers. That is to say, 1.96% of customers control 82.15% of the total assets of all customers. In other words, these 2% of people hold 80% of the wealth. Former China Construction Bank financial planner Shi Huawei remarked, "In economics, there is the Pareto principle, which states that 20% of the people own 80% of the wealth in society. In today's China, it's around 2%. Approximately 2% of the population controls over 80% of the wealth. This indicates that China's wealth is increasingly concentrated in the hands of a very small fraction of people, and the wealth gap is not decreasing but widening. As a result, the Chinese government has introduced the so-called Common Prosperity Plan, The idea is to alleviate poverty by various means, including seizing the wealth of the rich. Is it just an illusion? Xi Jinping shouts common prosperity, targeting the bourgeois and urging companies to contribute money, being seen as returning to the old communist path of robbing the rich to help the poor. Chinese President Xi Jinping not only paints the grand dream of poverty alleviation, but also recently, the Central Finance and Economic Affairs Commission of the Communist Party of China has called for the initiation of a common prosperity special plan, aiming to achieve the goal of universal wealth. It emphasizes that common prosperity is the prosperity of all people, not the prosperity of a few. It specifically mentions that the high-income population needs to give more back to society. The struggle of the Cultural Revolution begins. Xi Jinping shouts a common prosperity. Commentator Wu Zijie says it's difficult for the poor to become rich, so let's dig into the pockets of the rich. He says there are only two ways to achieve common prosperity. One is to empower the poor, allowing them to earn money and become wealthy. The other, simpler method, is to cut off the wealth of the rich, make the rich surrender their money, turn the rich into the middle class, make them disappear. And wouldn't that be common prosperity? Therefore, common is crucial, and prosperity depends on the government's definition. Let the government define what is considered prosperous. Common prosperity forces the wealthy to flee, and the number of houses for sale in Shanghai increases by 30%. After being re-elected for the third term at the 20th National Congress, Chinese President Xi Jinping continues to promote the common prosperity policy, creating uncertainty for many wealthy individuals about the future. According to a report by the South China Morning Post, there are nearly 140,000 second-hand houses for sale in Shanghai in October, a surge of 30% compared to the end of last year. Commentator Wu Lingxiang says, can common prosperity solve the wealth disparity at the grassroots? Common prosperity can address some of it, but it's absolutely impossible to solve all poverty problems. Poverty is inherent and cannot be completely eliminated in any country worldwide because people are inherently unequal. His words theoretically support the idea that the so-called common prosperity and universal poverty alleviation are just impossible propositions.